It's the Jim Fannon Show. Michael Johns is joining me next. Like it if you like it. Share it if you just like it, share it. Who cares? Welcome Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, DLive. It's the Jim Fannon Show. Welcome aboard, crew. That's my own music, made by local studs right here in Niagara. Welcome aboard. Michael Johns, man, what an interesting character. And he's been making media appearances all over the place. Busy man. So I really appreciate the time. He will join me at the top of the hour, which is 1 p.m. EST. That's my time. The co-founder of the National Tea Party. And, the movement, I guess. The Tea Party isn't actually a party. And former speechwriter for George Bush Sr. And he's a policy analyst at Heritage, as you see on the screen right here. And a grad of the University of Miami. Here's fear. We're not going there today, I don't think. And here's my guest. He also has a Facebook page. Oh, you don't want to see those notifications coming up there. You probably don't want to send me messages while I'm broadcasting live. I will be carrying the minister responsible for screwing over our native peoples for potable water. He said this was an election promise, right? Indigenous peoples, natives, we're supposed to have clean drinking water already, and they're not getting it. There's my doorbell. Excuse me while I let my guest in. How do you do this? Oh, I need a producer. Here we go. We're going to admit Mr. Johns, and then we're going to go live to him. Mr. Johns, can you hear me okay?
Jim, how you doing?
I'm good, man. We're already live. Our pictures aren't up yet, but I really appreciate your time. Man, you're a busy man these days. Thanks for the time.
Yeah. Very frantic moment for our country.
Yeah.
And you're welcome. Good to be with you.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe could you just spend a little bit of time briefly describing who you are, where you came from, and how you got to this point?
That's a long story. I mean, so
we got as long as you need, but you can be brief if you like.
I grew up in the Lehigh Valley area of Pennsylvania, very blue-collar, hardworking, sort of purple political region of the country, watching a lot of industry shut down in the 80s, and it kind of sparked a little bit of my political interest. I didn't really spark any ideology, but from there I went to the University of Miami and developed a lot of close friends, Cuban-American friends, who told stories of their plight under communist Cuba. I kind of became involved in the Reagan era at that time and did some DC internships and was very involved as president of the College of Republicans at the university. Went to Washington, D.C. after graduating and worked with the Heritage Foundation, probably the world's leading conservative think tank, for 5 years as a first an editor of their magazine and then as a foreign policy analyst. Worked with the Republican governor in New Jersey, Tom Kean, who also chaired the 9/11 Commission. Went into the first Bush administration as a White House speechwriter to President Bush. Relevant to this moment, when that administration ended, I became director of a organization called the International Republican Institute that was highly involved in providing guidance to developing democracies around the world about how to develop political parties and democratic infrastructure and civil society and how to run free and fair elections, because we're the global expert in that, you know.
I see your tongue-in-cheek.
At the time, I certainly felt that we were. Mm-hmm. I went in the healthcare industry, worked with a good number of three major Fortune 1000 healthcare providers. And 2009, I was one of the co-founders of our Tea Party movement and have been heavily engaged in that. I was a day one supporter of Donald Trump on June 16th, 2015. Generally, I've been very supportive of his candidacy in 16 and then of his presidency for the last 4 years. I've done a lot of writing and then on public policy as well. Wall Street Journal, Christian Science Monitor, National Review, many book chapters and articles and things of that nature.
Well, you're deep into it. I'm a 10-time political candidate here in Canada, mostly for the Green Party on the left. And it shocks me that even 5 years ago, almost to the day, I was in the middle of my last Green Party candidacy. Mm-hmm. Now, I never ran because I thought I was going to get elected. At the time, I think I felt like the left needed a voice. It certainly doesn't now. And I've been painfully red-pilled over the last 5 years to a moderate center position of conservative values, of free speech, of, more gun laws aren't going to make safer communities, just immigration, all of it. And I was never a Trump fan. And I actually gave Trudeau some room to impress me. I was so tired of the leadership under Stephen Harper, who was the last conservative prime minister, that I was really hopeful for the Liberals, but that was, again, as a lefty. And I was kind of moving towards the center even when Trudeau came in, but I gave him room. I did the same with Trump. I gave him room I just made a deal with myself that I wasn't going to hate him. All right. I wasn't going to generate any new hate for him. I like where my hate is placed right now. It's pretty strategically placed on things that he should hate, and I didn't watch him come down the escalator. And I gave him room. And then, he won me over with his humor, his anti-establishment presence, his accessibility during COVID, man, on immigration, on China, on mail-in ballots, on all this. He just kept lining up with me. I my Twitter bio says I'm a reluctant Trump fan because the left took him out of context so often. I found myself defending him. He certainly doesn't need me to defend him. He can do that well himself. But I say all that to say I'm kind of new, but now I'm obsessed with American politics since Trump. All of it, Congress, the Senate, the election. And I was on with Eric Matheny and the boys the other day, and I truly asked these guys because I want to know, and I get the answer that the sovereignty of the states is important. When it came to the occupied area in Seattle, I said, roll the tanks. My MAGA crew on Twitter was like, easy, bro, easy. No, we can't do that. I don't understand the states changing the way you elect the most important office in the world right before the election and how that goes. Man, if Bannon and Stone were here, I don't think we would have been tolerating that kind of stuff. But right. So, and then I've heard you refer to purple states. Is purple states, the way I understand it, the ones that are up for grabs? They go back and forth.
I guess swing state would be
swing state. Yeah, right. Okay.
Meaning it's a roughly equal distribution of Democrat and Republican registered voters and independents in that mix.
Okay, so let's get into today. What are your frustrations? What do you find yourself on I know you're doing lots of media work. Man, you've got quite the following on Twitter. I saw, you retweeted me yesterday, and I can't believe the response. But you've got a huge account. So, what do you find yourself, speaking to today? What do people want to hear from you?
I just can't think of any single or greater issue at this moment than the fact that we have demonstrable fraud in this 2020 election, and we have institutions in our country and a major party that's been apparently a beneficiary of that fraud who seem to be unwilling to want to just even confront the facts. And I can't speak to the magnitude. I think you've got sort of various categories. There's people who have no idea what's going on. That's a very unfortunate reality. It's partly a product of media not covering these issues. We've got people who feel that it's Trump whining, which if it were that, and if I had looked at it, even as a Trump supporter, and I believe that to be, if this were an issue of him just finding, some way to leave and blame the whole system and there was no substance to it, I'd be the first one on here saying that that was the case. We have people like myself who've looked at it in great detail, have been involved in looking at it in great detail, who feel that the fraud is indisputable and needs to be litigated, investigated, and that it's raising really hugely important, even constitutional questions, because we cannot inaugurate and swear in a president who did not win 270 electoral votes fairly. And then there's probably another group over there of people who feel that in a country of 330 million, that Trump won 700 million votes, and that this is, really, it's just, a personal thing. So, in my view, there's probably close to 10 different categories of fraud that have been employed here. It certainly does appear coordinated, and I am just flabbergasted at how unseriously it's been taken, including by people who have spent their lifetime saying that they were running organizations, were committing themselves to our Constitution, when the centerpiece of that Constitution, representative democracy, is under an unprecedented assault in this country.
Great points. And, I think it's an uphill battle. I don't know that it is in court. I hope that you get a fair hearing in court for this kind of stuff. But the media just doesn't want to talk to them about it. Now, we're pretty aware that the media is pretty left-leaning, and they do what they can to promote the issues that they feel they agree with, for lack of a better term. And you just...
Is that even ideological? I'm sort of at the point where I'm starting to conclude that these things aren't even ideologically driven. These are institutions of power that have aligned themselves, out of probably selfish or, self-centered reasons. I mean, if you ask me to sort of say, what is it about Biden that's appealing to anyone in this country, or why would 80 million Americans go out and vote for him with a 47-year track record that really, you couldn't even really identify any major accomplishment in? I think you'd struggle, and I'm starting to conclude that this is more an issue of global forces at play that have a very concrete agenda about where they want to take things. China very much a big part of that, and this issue of autonomy and individual rights that somehow is standing in the way of those designs, and in many ways has created differences and conflict even among voting constituencies that wouldn't otherwise exist. It's a shame. I mean, you probably have seen it even with the Green Party. I mean, there's a lot of support for sensible environmental policies in this country among conservatives. I mean, this line that somehow it's a big joke or we don't take it seriously is not true. We just have concerns with, say, this Paris Agreement that's just a wealth redistribution scheme. It doesn't hold the single greatest polluter in the world, China, accountable for anything. It doesn't require any diminished CO2 emissions on their part. I'm sure as an activist in the Green Party, you probably share the concerns of that, but I've seen these organizations being influenced by vast sums of money. So if you've got China money involved in U.S.-based environmental organizations, it sort of becomes convenient to point the finger at the U.S. while we've been, I think, pretty consciously involved in this, and they've done absolutely nothing. I mean, they're the most reckless polluter in the history of the world, and not one environmental concern really seems to be focused on that reality. Like, if you were going to get involved in this and you weren't part of this broader dialogue, I think you would start by saying, well, where do we start environmentally? You start with the worst offender, and what can we do there? And they have been completely inoculated from any criticism of their unbelievably irresponsible practices.
Michael Johns is my guest. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. What do you say? I know this is probably like going back to kindergarten. You've been a conservative all your life. I've come around. I don't see many people that come around the opposite way. They start out conservative and then go left. I think it's mostly left to right. What do you say to red pill someone quickly, like your elevator pitch, as far as if they're ideologically flexible, which most people aren't? I don't consider myself to be now. I was when I was a lefty because, I had some conflicts, my religion, my take on abortion, even capital punishment came into question because it really didn't line up with what I believed my whole life. So what do you say to people that might be ideologically or politically flexible as far as getting them to come over to your side?
Well, we have to have reasonable expectations of what we want from government. Government is a solution to a lot of things. It's not a solution to everything. So you need to be conscious of the fact that government can do great degree of harm. And then whenever government comes knocking, offering something, there's usually a lot of footnotes attached to it that nobody gets a chance to read. The war on poverty is a perfect example in this country. Who doesn't want to conquer poverty? Who doesn't want to launch a war on poverty? But, we're decades into this whole thing now. And by every metric, the people that were designed to be lifted out of poverty by this program have had just the opposite result. They've been captured into a system of communities filled with violence, welfare dependency, incarcerations of parents, bad schools, drugs on the street, gun violence. I think you start with a recognition that our Constitution is got to be adhered to, and it has to be the governing focus through which everything runs, or we're a lawless society that's going to be driven by, special interests and big money. I think you start with the fact of asking yourself a question: is money better off in the hands of people who can spend it and invest in their well-being and their kids' well-being, or is it better off in the hands of the government? That hopefully is answered, a question that answers itself. Start with the fact of saying that in a world where capital can go anywhere, where jobs can be created anywhere, where companies can locate anywhere, do we want to be overly burdening and regulating companies, or do we want to be creating a hospitable environment for job creators? You start with, those questions, and then the issues of autonomy. I mean, if you took the issue of just border security, it's such a sensible thing. We have a country for a reason, and we need to protect the people that are here, and we can't just recklessly be allowing people to sort of come in here. I love that about Trump, that he put such a focus on that. And it's not even just the southern border, but our overstayed visas. We're one of the few countries in the world where you literally can get a guest visa, fly into the United States, and never leave. And there's plenty of people today who are either citizens, green card holders, or still here as illegals who came in exactly that way. It's not received, nearly enough attention. Trump's brought attention to it. It's now a centerpiece, I think, of our conservative agenda. And then you start with the fact that, I guess, the final fact that I'd point out, that there's really ominous, threatening forces in the world that, seek to do bad things. And I'd put China in that category, Russia to a certain extent in that category. Terrorist movements have been diminished on the watch of Trump. ISIS eliminated, but we're not done with Islamic extremism. Are we better off with a strong national global presence strategically and in a defense and national security posture, or are we better off in a weak position? Obviously, we're better off strong, and that's a core component. It is kind of amazing how all these issues sort of align, and then kind of everyone subscribes to all of them, and you don't get a whole lot of deviation. I also think we got to unify in this country, in the United States, and I think it's true in Canada too. I mean, I talked to all these guys out in Alberta who want to, break off from Canada, right. And I mean, there's a lot of disgust with what's going on in Ottawa, and the fact that I see a lot of similarities of people who either have completely bought into this Trudeau vision, which is largely a globalist one, and then those who feel, well, this is not the course we want to go down at all, and feel completely unrepresented in that government. That's part of the reason these fights have gotten so contentious, including in the United States, is that you think about however this thing works out for President Trump, and I'll be honest, I'm going to fight this, but I'm not under any illusions that this is going to be easy or even optimistic about the outcome. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have, 70 some million Americans who voted for this president who are now going to see a president come in and take the country in the complete polar opposite direction of what they voted for, because he secured a few million votes in a few states, maybe, and maybe legally, maybe not legally. But I think that's what makes it so difficult. I think that's what made it difficult for the left in 2016. It's what made it difficult for conservatives back in 2008, is that you have, as these parties have become very agenda driven, these become, there's no consolation prize in these presidential races. We don't have, a kind of system where individuals are afforded some sort of proportionate representation, like some countries of the world. And so for literally half the voter base, however this goes, they feel alienated by it. I do think Trumpism has redefined the Republican Party. I think he's brought a lot of positive things to the way we approach things. And yet clearly, for whatever reason, there's these sort of people who vote based on an instinctual feel about a person. Did he alienate some people? He probably did, but were those people really voting for him anyway? Did those people vote for McCain and Romney and then they said, oh no, I don't like this guy's tweets, I'm not going to vote for him? I'm sort of more inclined to think, when I encounter those people, that they use his Queen's demeanor, which, having grown up in kind of not in the five boroughs, but in that general area, as common demeanor, as an excuse not to have to dive into the more complicated policy objections they have about him. That's the way I see it right now, at least.
You were touching on some of your work installing democracies around the world. I agree that a safer world is a better place for all of us, America, Canada, North, all of us. And I wonder what your thoughts are. Have you shifted any? Trump's started to bring troops home. I think he's got to be the most peaceful president of all time. Are you suffering from the opinion that, maybe it's just time to look inward, take care of our own people inside our borders? There's this huge discussion about foreign aid, especially in our country, going out to countries where we can't control where they spend it. How much are we really doing outside of our own borders, and how many resources could we turn back inward without seem to be xenophobic, for lack of a better term?
I think my views absolutely have evolved. So if you look at the beginning of my involvement, it was Cold War period, and I think you necessarily had to be engaged globally, or you had to be seen as not taking the Cold War seriously. And then even in the years following the Cold War, it's less appreciated now, but those were some really definitional years where we either were going to solidify these emerging democratic political systems, or we were going to neglect them and see them maybe go in a negative direction. And many of them did go in a negative direction. But at this point, the priority of the government of the United States has to be take care of the people of this country. We have millions of Americans now not in work. We have a pandemic that I think it's fair to say, aside from China, I don't know anyone disputing this, that China unleashed on the world, and that we have got to get through. For the purposes of public health, for the purposes of our economy, for the purposes of our sanity and safety. And we have so many unaddressed issues in this country: education, healthcare. I think it's a deficiency on our side there too. We need to, I think our objections to Obamacare are very logical and sensible. I mean, I could talk to you it's not even really a healthcare plan. It's like a catastrophic plan, but it's ridiculous that 10 years into this, and our Tea Party movement led the fight against Obamacare, that it comes time to repeal and replace, and we don't have a replacement plan that's like readily available. That to me is like, when we talk about swamp problems, that's a big problem. And, we're going to ultimately look back on this Trump administration and say, here are the things that went well and here are the things that didn't go well. I mean, one of the things that didn't go well is, my conclusion is you can't fight the whole world simultaneously, right? So he's, standing up boldly and correctly in some places, but one of the areas that I think is going to really emerge as a weak point was his own personnel decisions. I mean, he put people in place, many of whom left and criticized and even led opposition to him and wrote books disparaging him. You got to be honest and say, look, those were bad hires. So he's delivered a lot of promises, and the ones he didn't deliver, he certainly attempted to deliver. Did he bring us the best people, which was promised in 2016? I don't think so. I think he was put into a position of having to compromise his judgment on some of that to people who represented they knew more, they really didn't. And a lot of time and some policy progress was sacrificed in the process.
What do you feel in his communication strategy? I don't necessarily obviously want you to speak for him, but what's your take on how much of his communication is his own, and how coachable was he as a candidate, and how much is he? I mean, my frustration when I work with people that are seeking office is that they don't listen to the political operatives that have the knowledge and know how to get people elected, know what works, knows what doesn't work, and you really want your candidate to be coachable. How much do you think he's fallen in line, and how much do you think he's said, forget it, I'm doing my own thing out here?
I don't think there's been any administration in my lifetime where the communications offices, speech writing, the press secretary's office, the communications function itself has probably had as little influence as it has on Trump, because there were just a lot of examples where, they would carve out certain strategies and approaches and messaging, and most of the messaging at some point in there, I guess probably like when Sarah Sanders left, I would say it was probably the moment where he just said, look, I'm just going to do this all myself. And he went out, and most of the communication that came out of the White House were his South Lawn press, briefings of answering half a dozen or 10 questions, and they kind of would take over the news cycle. And I can understand his desire to want to do that. And the things he did and said on those were basically good. I mean, I don't think it was hurtful, but when you bring these experts in, you get to realize there's so many components to public messaging for a president of the United States. And it's so profoundly impactful. I mean, it's not even just the popularity of the president or his agenda. I mean, you literally are in a position where rhetoric can inflame global tensions. It could start wars. It can move markets. It can have all kinds of effects. So it is a sensitive undertaking. And there's also one of message discipline, because the people of the country are bombarded, and this is true in corporate communications where I work too, is that they're getting like 1,000 messages a day that they're being asked to absorb. They may not be consciously aware that they're receiving them, but they're commercials, there's messaging, there's their own interaction. To keep people focused on what really matters, there needs to be a lot of repetition, and there needs to be a lot of explanation. There shouldn't be any Americans who's unable to at least articulate why the president believes the way he does, even if they disagree on that position. So I think some of it, he's a guy who personally has properly a great degree of self-confidence in his ability to accomplish things. And he's one of the most accomplished Americans of our lifetime, beyond any doubt. Whatever you think of him, he's done extraordinary things. But, I've always been in the opinion that politics is a communal undertaking, and requires a lot of collaboration and cooperation. And I'm also of the opinion that you never run into someone who doesn't probably know a whole lot more about one subject than you, at least one subject, if not more than you do. So that's why the staffing becomes important. If you get people who agree with your general sense of direction, where you want to take things, and they can add in, they can fill in some of the content and even the methodologies on how to get it done, that becomes a really valuable add-on. But if you spend, say, 2 years arguing with Rex Tillerson about whether to get out of the Iran agreement, when that was like a core foreign policy premise, like a whole bunch of questions emerged to me. One, why does Rex Tillerson go in the Trump administration at all? You know, when you disagree on fundamental positions like that. And two, why would that be, a selection when you've got people whose foreign policy positions are completely aligned with yours, and yet there's example after example of these. And even when he was hospitalized, this is when this became just so profoundly important to me. And I'm reading these Maggie Haberman pieces in the New York Times, quoting anonymous sources in the White House, criticizing the President of the United States and talking about what a political disaster it was when this guy is literally in the hospital. You've got that level of disloyalty in your administration, you have a really serious problem. And that was the one thing he could control. I think he awakened the American people to the bias of the media, but he couldn't change the media. He tried to work with Democrats in Congress. Ultimately when they say we'll resist is our motto, we're not dealing with you. What else can you do? I mean, you can try to exert some pressure. I think he did. You can't control that. The deep state, I suppose he could have done a lot more there too. I mean, I find it incredible that you can have an attorneys representing your campaign who say, hey, look, these individuals in our intel services may have been were implicated in this process of electoral fraud. That's an astonishing statement to make. But, at that point, the leadership requires one of two things. You either accept the view of your attorneys and you terminate the people running those agencies, or you get new attorneys. But to allow these kind of like conflicting forces to play is a little bit indecisive. And look, I mean, I don't think, sadly, that this drain the swamp was a great motto. But he's not leaving. Well, he won't. If he does leave Washington January 20, the swamp is very much in control, and it will be one of the failures. And when you look at 4 years of inability to have made substantial revisions in organizational structures, in personnel, I feel, frankly, it is a lost opportunity. And this is one of the messages that becomes complicated for somebody like me, who's been out front as a leading spokesperson for the president, is that you've got these people who just like everything Trump does is correct, everything Trump does is bad. This more nuanced position is that he was the man for this job, that he's been a great president for this country, that he's been unfairly treated by just about every institution, but that there were some things that could have been done better. Seems to me to be a reasonable one. I'm not sure how hospitable he is personally to that level of messaging, but I certainly would say, look, on drain the swamp issues on a number of these promises, sadly, he's going to leave with not a lot of institutional change. But neither, Obama didn't, we blocked Obama for 6 of his 8 years, the Tea Party movement did. I mean, it's underappreciated globally, I think, the fact that in Tea Party versus Obama, Tea Party won. We won 1,000 political races against Democrats during the Tea Party reign under Obama. They had almost no success. We had a recipe, we had a message, we had grassroots activism and engagement, organization, good candidates that we recruited. I just think we beat them every step of the way. And I can't, if I look at the future, if you bring this guy in, Biden, I just think I think this country is going to turn on him pretty rapidly. They're going to sense that he does not have leadership. He has no secret recipe for the pandemic. and that his policies are, ones that are ultimately going to be detrimental economically and to the growth of the country, to the stability of the country, I think he's going to struggle immensely.
It's hard to imagine that an election could have this many irregularities and still go forward as legitimate. I get the whole argument, especially the messaging coming from the Trump campaign, that this isn't about me. This is about the United States of America's future elections. And when I watched this go down, I was kind of hopelessly saying, you know what? Another Republican will never be elected ever again if this is allowed to stand. What do you see as, I know you're not a lawyer, but maybe you could speak to, I don't know, can you give us any hope that this might be turned around? And I don't know that, man, if this turns around and the House elects Trump president, Antifa's going to go wild forever. I haven't heard anything about Antifa lately, but I'm not sure. And this is why I'm ideologically moderate and center. I just can't look at the left anymore and go, well, you disavow science, biology, facts you don't seem to care about. And then not only do you welcome the rioting and the burning and the murder, you cheer it on. You actually reward it.
I would love to have a peaceful dialogue, as I attempted to have with Occupy Wall Street, by the way, not appreciated. But, I went up there and proactively sought out and articulated the fact that if we can agree on 10% of things, even as it relates to our fiscal policy and banking policy, how powerful would that be if we can work together? No American is my enemy, is my position. You're not my enemy. If you get caught up in globalist, unethical practices, or if you're, obstructing the civil right of the American people to select their leadership, then maybe you are. But these divides are not as clear-cut as they used to be. I think they have been artificially designed, and we need to try to break them down, but it takes two sides to want to do that. I have some very concrete ideas about things we need to do, and the question is, can we do them? But I feel there's way too much power in the leadership of Congress. So a lot of these Republicans who I worked with in the 2020 election are now going to go to Washington as members of Congress, and they're boiling over with enthusiasm about what they think they can do, how they can make a difference. They promised in their campaigns they would make a difference. But everyone knows in both parties, the first conversations you have when you get there are with the leaders of these respective parties, who pretty much say this is the way it goes. And the way it goes is you listen to what they say. I mean, if you're going to go as a newly elected Democrat and fight Nancy Pelosi, you're going nowhere. They're going to primary you. They're not going to put you in any committees. None of your legislation is going to get to the floor. It becomes a horrible place to work. It's true on our side, too. I mean, to a large extent. And then you sort of say, well, why do these leaders develop such hardened positions? Why aren't they a little more flexible in understanding these people don't report to the House Speaker, or to the Senate, or to the House minority leader? They report to the people of their district. Well, that's where money comes into play, and the fact that these parties have become instruments of big money, and the division itself is a product of big money at play, because most members of Congress on an individual basis, particularly newer ones, are decent people that find themselves in the machine, basically, with very little options on what to do, very little support outside to change this system that we have fallen into. And, so that's a huge issue. And then you get these situations of divided government with a party, whether it's us or them, who says those are not acceptable options for us, and don't come to, compromise on them, and you get government by executive order. And we're really in a major situation right now that I don't, it's something I've talked about rhetorically. It's something to be feared that we needed to avoid. That was always a possibility, but the fact that it's now right there knocking on the door is a terrifying wake-up moment, I think, to me. And equally shocking is that it's not more terrifying to a greater number of Americans, because this is how autocracy gains its roots in a society. It is ultimately through ambivalence. People sort of come to this conclusion. It's one that's been held a long time, but now it's really solidified. My vote doesn't matter. There's nothing I can do. I don't control the system. They feel helpless, powerless. In some ways they are, if you allow these things to happen, which is why we need to fight so hard to make sure that these are not institutionalized. And Trump is right. If his only lasting legacy is that he uprooted these corrupt practices and put them to an end, that would be an extraordinary contribution to our country.
What do you see if you take the 2020 election out? I know that you're really focused on that right now, but what are the most important conversations you think, or maybe some of your top issues that you're most passionate about before this election came up and the controversy that surrounded it?
Well, for starters, Biden talked about repealing the Trump tax cuts, but the Trump tax cuts, 82% of the middle class of this country receive tax relief. And then he simultaneously, for political purposes, tried to say, oh no, I just mean people who make over $400,000 a year. So his position, that was never really resolved or reconciled. He was never really questioned on that fact. These Trump tax cuts were a big part of the 7 million plus jobs and the wage increases that we were starting to experience before the pandemic hit. That's a big issue. I find it really disbelieving that as Biden campaigned that he had any magic solution to the pandemic. As I pointed out, he opposed the travel ban, the January 31 travel ban with China, which was like the most important singular decision you could make. We didn't even have samples of this virus yet, and it's not one that had ever existed before. This idea that there's some textbook that you rip off the shelf on how to handle these situations is not realistic. But the one obvious thing you do is you stop the bleeding by preventing people from the host country from entering. Trump acted urgently, quickly, and bravely in doing that. And Biden criticized it, calling it xenophobic, which didn't even make any sense to me. He never was asked to clarify at what point did he ultimately decide that stopping individuals from coming from the country where this was originating was a good idea, not a bad idea. There was no accountability on that. I think his physical and mental health also was unscrutinized. I don't know what's going on with this guy, but to be blunt, no one's looking at him going, hey, he's in good shape and he's up to this job. And let me tell you, this job doesn't stop. It doesn't rest. I've been close enough to it to tell you it's the single greatest skill set you can have to be president of the United States, aside from a general vision of where you want to take things, is your ability to just take all kinds of incoming. It's just like boom, 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 boom. So, in a given month, a typical person might make maybe one or two major decisions. Now imagine making one or two major decisions every 5 minutes. It's like a very different style. And there's so many components to leadership. You've got your national security, your interaction with leaders of the world. You've got the domestic economy. You've got the political dimension of interacting with people and explaining what you're doing and keeping your support level. You've got interaction with Congress. You have all these constituencies that want to press their issues. You have the staffing issues and who you're listening to and who you're not listening to. It's an immensely demanding, almost overwhelmingly demanding job, which is why I said earlier that the staffing becomes important. Because if you have good people around you who are competent and share your vision, which is the most important part of it, it becomes at least a little bit easier.
What's your prediction on, and I feel like I might have created this own narrative for myself and then gone looking to prove it incorrectly. It seems like we're more divided than we've ever been. That men and women on just a whole are further apart than we've ever been. That our ideological possession is deeper on both sides. The canyon between us is further apart. It seems to me, man, there's a whole lot of, I said just the other day in an offhand remark, well, I like Trump more every day. I think he's someone really close to me said, I want to punch you in the face right now. And this is their reaction. And I think I went looking to prove it. And there's definitely been times in history when we've been more divided. I mean, we've had many wars. I mean, that's pretty deep division.
But domestically, even if you took the one contentious war that we had in Vietnam, I would say we were a much more united country.
I would agree.
In the middle of the Vietnam War debate than we are today. You're exactly right. These views are, there's no, look, I was asking rhetorically during the campaign, is there even an undecided voter out there? I mean, is there somebody literally who's looked at the last 5 years and not already concluded Trump is what we need, or Trump absolutely needs to go? Mm-hmm. I can't imagine there were too many voters who were sitting around scratching their head on these two completely polar opposite options. And if you say, well, why has it changed so dramatically? Because I think if you took the central positions that Trump represented and that are basically core to contemporary conservatism, they're not terribly different than they were 50 years ago.
It's just the mouth that it came out. That some people just couldn't agree with the man because of his presentation.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, and that is like, I wish I could say for sure, like if the same agenda was being pursued in a way that was more acceptable to these people who want to punch people in the face and they're all over the place, would they be more accepting of it? So when you sort of drill down and you say, what really was it that led you to oppose this man? A big part of it is the fact that the Democrat Party and the progressive agenda has itself become so radicalized, transparently socialist for the most part. So if you've got a guy who's out there who's actually taking steps that are anti-socialist, they're strengthening our free market economy. And if your position is we should have, which I assume is Biden's position, we should have no border security. I mean, that itself is unbelievable to me. Mm-hmm. No one again has asked him, what point does illegal immigration become a problem to you? If it's 11 to 30 million now, is it 50 million, 100 million, 150? What's 150 million illegal immigrants in this country?
Who could imagine that just saying, I want to end illegal immigration could be a controversial statement? Wow.
And again, I come back to these other countries, is there anything more hypocritical and almost disgraceful than seeing like China criticizing our border security? Can you think of any country in the world that has more scrutiny? You know what the penalty is for entering China illegally? I mean, you're going to face a closed door trial. You're not going to have legal defense.
I think you should be afraid of getting shot if you're sneaking across a border.
And you know what? When you do it that way, apparently people think twice about coming into the country.
Yeah.
When you release them into the country and give them some date to show up in court 18 months from now, shockingly, it's not enough deterrence. Seems common sense to me.
We have a border crossing at Roxham Road in Canada that is, we share the border with you guys. Now, these refugees seeking asylum they've been through 5 countries before they come to Canada, including yours.
Yeah.
And they bring their Gucci luggage to the border. They walk straight across. It's unguarded, but there's someone on the other side, an official that will take them in an ambulance to a hotel room where they will wait for their welfare payments. And guys that are on retirement getting Canada pension here are like, these guys sneak into our country, immediately get benefits that even my old age pension doesn't equal. And somehow we've got a leader here in Canada, Max Bernier. Maxime is a conservative. He left the conservative because he just couldn't get anything done. Now he's got his own party that he's really having a hard time getting off the ground or even getting himself elected. He wants to put a complete moratorium on immigration just until we settle down after COVID. The economy's not great. Unemployment's through the roof. And this is somehow controversial. I think it's pretty... I don't think it's controversial to say I want to end illegal immigration. I think you should fear getting shot if you cross a border at a point that's not, that's if you take border security seriously, that's what it looks like to me. I know that's going over the top a little bit, but I just don't understand. The left is, well, Rubin put it best, I think. I didn't leave the left left me. Well, the left got so radical, including the media, that a guy that's moderate center position, right-leaning like me, is seen as a radical extremist for some reason. But the people that are telling, our prepubescent children that they can become the opposite sex, all they got to take is these puberty blockers and get an operation before they reach their natural puberty. That's somehow okay. It just, man, it leaves me wondering.
The biggest accomplishment of the left is their ability to stigmatize these issues. So there's not really a debate going on over them. I mean, because this is the other really big divide between the left and the right. The left has these absolutely uncompromisable views that are just supposed to be stipulated as indisputable divine fact. And, we kind of explain things in an integral, statistical based, metric based, reasoned way. And their policies, you look at where the designs are, they're not things that are coming up from the people rising. It's top down. It's, this global progressive elite that has, what's been called the global reset. I mean, global reset is a real thing. It's not imagined. There is in fact, a design that would shift a lot of autonomy out of this country into a globalist arena, and would ultimately be very detrimental for us. But those issues, like when they decide an issue, it can't be even debated or discussed. It becomes off limits, and then there's no limit as to what can be done. So I'm starting to see some stigma attached, even questioning these election practices. I sit there in Arizona, Michigan, state after state that's now held hearings. You just watch person after person after person come up and describe these outrageous and transparently illegal processes that were utilized. And we're to be led to believe that we're just supposed to discount all of that. I'm seeing it a lot also in just these labels they put on things. But this decision that just came out with the NASDAQ, that you have to now have, every ethnic, sexual, gender constituency represented, and you have to report this to be a member on that. Is extraordinary leap, and now gets us into a position where you have one of the largest stock exchanges in the world, home to some of the fastest growing and most dynamic companies in the world, that apparently need to be now directed by predominantly these identity politics considerations, not by just let's go get the best people we can get. Yeah. And if it's all women, that's great. If it's 100% all gays, great. But this idea that somehow from a top down, whether it's government or whether these institutions should do it. And as someone who reads a lot of business media, which most in the political world don't, this bias that we described in the way issues are handled in mainstream media is equally applicable to business media. I mean, I'm just astonished when you open these publications, some of which are the most iconic business publications in the world, it's all this sort of social engineering and progressive agenda, which they're entitled to their agenda. They're entitled to put it forward. But these aren't even things that are being like legitimately debated because they've been so stigmatized. I'll be interested to see, like on this NASDAQ thing, some of the biggest companies in the world are now going to have to report and could potentially ultimately be literally delisted from a stock exchange because by the exchange for a company that has no stake in that company, doesn't run that company, doesn't hold even one share in that company, that they don't like the composition of their board is an astonishing thing. And as opposed to blaming, like, where did that idea come from? Did NASDAQ sit around and come up with that idea? No.
I think Hollywood came up with it. It came from the Oscars.
The left went in there and said, this is what we expect you to do. And if you're not going to do it, it becomes like extortion, basically.
Right.
They can be very threatening. And our side is like missing in action on these debates. I mean, we're writing a white paper here and there about why it's a bad idea, but that's not the way these decisions are getting made any longer.
Do you see the pendulum swinging back? I feel like we've lost a sense of personal responsibility. This whole, we treat minorities and women as victims. They need a hand up. Without the government helping out or placing these people in important positions, they wouldn't be there. Forget the meritocracy argument. Does the pendulum swing back to a point where we go, okay, this is America. You're in charge. Anybody can make it here. Just get off your ass and work hard. You can't be anything you want by just wishing for it. It takes hard work. It takes a plan. It takes connections. Sometimes it takes, good people around you. I mean, we look at Prime Minister Trudeau here in Canada. The man is not intelligent, but he was smart enough to ride his father's name and put really good people around him that knew how to get him elected and keep him elected and make deals with guys like Jagmeet Singh, who was playing a video game with AOC the other day. I cannot understand how we got this far left and how it ever comes back. You see it in the media. You see it in, I was speaking to people that get, they have TDS, that's Trump derangement syndrome. These are not politically astute people. The only thing they're telling me that they want to punch me in my face for is because grab them by the pussy or good people on both sides or some other quote that's been taken out of context. These are not intellectually, politically savvy people that are educated on the issues. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I ran 10 elections.
How do they feel about the Biden sexual assault allegation?
Oh, no, that's just...
Did they watch the 60 Minutes Australia interview with her? Because while I believe in rule of law and legal process and innocent until proven guilty, I don't think I've seen too many women who came forward who looked more believable than she did. And boy, did that just not receive any attention, just like the Hunter Biden scandal. I mean, literally, we just ostensibly, we haven't elected anybody yet, but heading toward electing a guy who has hundreds of millions of dollars that come in from China, Russia, Ukraine, has spent his entire career, like when we say, what's he been doing the last 47 years? Well, he's been putting his family on boards. His brother now, I just had seen, was on a board of an Iraqi company that after he went to Iraq, there's this whole series of developments through those 8 years of Obama where he was given authority on a certain country-specific mission. He would fail in that mission. Like, so in Iraq, he was gone in, he was charged with getting American soldiers protected from being prosecuted under Iraqi law. And of course, he failed there, but his brother comes away, he's on the board of a $1.5 billion Iraqi housing project. He goes into Ukraine to talk about the issue of the Russian threat and how to deal with Crimea and how to deal with the corrupt Ukrainian political system, which was then one of the worst in the world, fails completely and all that. But, Hunter Biden ends up on the Burisma board at $50K or more a month with no experience in energy, no experience in Ukraine, probably couldn't tell you the capital of Ukraine before he was put on the Burisma board. He starts getting involved with Russia, $3.5 million mysteriously just sent we still don't even know what that was for. It came out in 2 Senate investigations. And then you go to China. He goes into China to talk about curtailing their illegal activities in the waters of the South China Sea, and to get them to cease manipulating their currency, stealing our intellectual property. All of these steps fails in every one of those initiatives, but tens upon tens of millions arrive into a private equity fund that this guy has set up with other relatives of John Kerry, other individuals that were in positions of authority at that time. John Kerry's son being one, son-in-law, since it was not his own son. So the whole thing is stepson, I should say. It's immensely troubling, and we had no serious coverage of it. Twitter famously blocked the New York Post links to even just general reporting on it. And these weren't speculative reports. These were reports based on email communication, testimony, investigative reporting. The American people needed to see that. And we've had some studies that have come out. A lot of Americans who said, look, if I had known the magnitude of these foreign entanglements and the lack of explanation for them and how suggested they are of some pay-to-play scheme, they would not have voted for him. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to look at this election and not feel we've been cheated in 5,000 different ways. I mean, we're already fighting media bias, social media bias, a very difficult, challenging environment to get the message through to the people. And then on top of that, you think about what they had to do to defeat Trump. I mean, it's astonishing. I mean, basically release a pandemic on the world, then conduct all this illogical street violence, make Trump the victim somehow, or somehow responsible for an incident in Minneapolis that was conducted by a law enforcement officer, managed by a Democrat mayor and a Democrat city council, somehow transfer that onto some being Trump's responsibility. And then even all of that wasn't enough. They had to essentially engage in all of these seemingly illegal processes. And I just say, where was our side? Like, I'm on this Dominion Systems. I don't know how anyone could look at that and have 2,000 jurisdictions in this country, 27 or 28 states, ultimately adopt it and say, of all the systems available, this is the one that we want. I mean, I wish those people would be questioned. I think they should be. There's no investigation on that either. How could you possibly, in 20 minutes, I looked into Dominion right after the election, and it was clear. They had 3 big reports out of the state of Texas, which this is like the most completely susceptible to hacking system that you could possibly identify.
I want to respect your time. We're coming up in an hour. Michael Johns is my guest. Thank you for your time. In a perfect world, and this might sound silly, you're the writer, director. You can write your fairy tale right from this point out. What's it look like, and what gets done in the next quarter, let's say? Obviously, Trump is back in the White House. How does it go? How does it play out? If this was your novel and you're going to write it just the way you wanted it, how does it go?
Well, politically, we unearth every one of these illegal activities. Hopefully that's enough to put Trump over 270, as the legal team believes it is. We prevail in the 2 crucially important Senate runoff races, January 5 in Georgia, and the president is reelected and sworn in on January 20, and with a absolute commitment to fulfill all of these very bold and serious and important steps. And maybe has even learned some lessons from the first term about the importance of the staffing around him, and really gets back into the rally mode of building the support from the American people. Because that's where this has to come from, which I realized that back in 2009 when we started the Tea Party movement, that we weren't there wasn't any institution or individual out there that was going to throw us a lifeline here. We had to build it up from the bottom up. That's still the case, and Trump is, to his credit, capitalized on that immensely. And then we get through this pandemic, get the economy back working, and hopefully have an amazing story to tell of a president who just overcome extraordinary opposition, to be just hospitalized on opinions. You see this guy hospitalized, released 2 weeks later, he's doing 5 rallies a day in 5 states. Just what an incredible leader, whatever you think of him. What energy he brings to it.
How can you miss this, especially contrast to Sleepy Joe? I hate to use that moniker, but this guy's got more energy. And you know who I want for my prime minister? Somebody that's not going to get pushed around. You don't look at Trump and go, oh, he's going up against Korea. He walked across the DMZ, for crying out loud. He's taking on China. He's taking on the media. There's nobody going to push this man around. So regardless of your political affiliation, can't you look at the guy and go, well, at least I got a strong leader? I can recognize leadership, and I'm a critic of leadership almost everywhere. And Trump, yes, he's had some failings. I think the first debate, he missed an opportunity there as far as, his style. Then he came around in the second debate. So I don't know that he's taken his advice of his advisors, but he gets it. That was a missed opportunity. Here we go. But I don't know how anyone can look at Joe Biden or Kamala Harris and go, yeah, I want these guys representing me on the world stage. I'm like, Mr. Johns, how do we go out of this interview on a hopeful note on, do you have a message to your supporters or your opposition out there? I get this whole idea we need to come together, but it's got to be more than platitudes. It's got to be more than, if this, man.
I wouldn't say that if I didn't feel we had the people. Look, I said there's three factors. There's the to victory here. And to the defense of the country. And one is you got to have the right ideas. Two, the people have to be with you. And I think we have those two things. Okay. But then the three is you have to be able to operationalize all that in a political and a policy sense. And this is where we fall over our feet all the time. And not only do we fall over our feet all the time on it, we don't even to this day seem to recognize the obvious leadership crisis that exists organizationally and in the way we're going about things. So the methodologies have to be completely re-examined because this is a communal undertaking. And if we don't get that, then we got a major, problem. So that really is I haven't really thought through it. I think that really is the key. And I also am encouraged, there's a lot of movements around the world. This is not even just national unity, but global unity. So, I hear from people, I think the Brexit movement was in a lot of ways inspired by the Tea Party movement. I know for a fact it was. I see a lot of those sentiments that are being admired and adopted elsewhere in Europe and in other regions of the world. And in your country in Canada all the time, I'm hearing from people that just feel not represented by that government. And that's headed, you can't say it's headed nowhere, it's headed somewhere, there's going to be political consequence to it. And hopefully we all, like I said, we all basically unify and work together toward those commonalities, educate the American people, and we have to over-communicate because our messaging is not it's not that it's not represented, it's misrepresented in the public domain. Literally to this day, reading any U.S. media outlet, mainstream media outlet, you're seeing Trump's baseless allegations, his unverified allegations, his conspiratorial allegations. Every one of these statements that's come out of these things that are in affidavits are legal evidence. Mm-hmm. These are not. They might be uncomfortable to people. Maybe they're not enough to create 270 electoral votes. I don't know, but they're indisputably accurate.
There seems there is no amount of evidence that would convince the media or left-leaning people ideological that would change their mind on Trump.
I don't know.
Somebody said the other day.
That's what's more troubling. They seem to if you're covering, say, do you believe that there were no Trump poll watchers excluded from these locations when we have video after video of them being held at hundreds of yards away or being escorted out of these facilities by police. I mean, it's demonstrably, like, I haven't even heard Democrats say that hasn't happened. Mm-hmm. Clearly it happened.
Not
and
to
it
mention,
happened for a reason, because with all these mail-in ballots, it created an opportunity for them to manipulate those ballots.
And the chain of command. I mean, we've seen trucks driving around with hundreds of thousands of ballots in the back of it.
In a typical criminal legal case, a lack of verifiable chain of command would be a basis for a total dismission of the entire case. You would have a complete vindication. We have to take all of that seriously, and this is ultimately going to come down to some state legislatures that are going to have, many of which are Republican, controlled. Like, you look at Pennsylvania as a great example. I mean, there is a legal mechanism in place for them to resolve this fraud, even if courts don't validate it. And our courts too have become usually politicized. I mean, that's when you ask why am I not optimistic terribly about it? I'm not optimistic because I think the evidence is going to be overwhelming and persuasive, and I don't think these judges are going to do much about it. And there's case after case where that's been the unfortunate reality of it.
Just on the way out, sir, give me your thoughts on, again, I'm obsessed with American politics now, and only because of Trump, and it's his fault. But how is it that you can have a federal election that has left the states to printing the ballots, collecting the ballots, counting the ballots, securing the ballots, and adjusting the rules just before the election? I don't see how any of this flies with the Constitution. Like, again, I'm a little bit of a neophyte. I don't have all the answers, but I'm just like, well, wait a second. We've got a federal election in the most powerful office in the planet that's not run by the people that it's electing. Like, you would think there would be enough federal infrastructure across the states that they could say, okay, well, these guys, okay, you're in charge. Here's where the ballots go.
Because we have a Democrat Party that, it's not like we just woke up to this issue of fraud. I've been addressing it for decades. I mean, some of the solutions are so obvious, like voter identification. When you go to register for voting, you should be given an ID card, just like you're given.
That's what we do in Canada, paper ballots, and you show ID when you show up.
So it's like, here's your ID. It probably costs the state about $2 or $3 to make one of those things. You give a photo on there, you have their address, their name, and something that demonstrates its authenticity with insignias or whatever. That fixes a lot of these issues. And then you got to clear up these voting rolls that we have. So we have literally, like, take me. I mean, I'm not uncommon in having lived in probably 6 different states or so in this country, each one in which I voted, each one of which I registered, each one of which I'm still probably listed. Like, if I literally wanted to fly around the country on election day, I probably could have voted in 6 different states and no one would have questioned that. No one would have learned about it. And it would have been entirely illegal to have done, but it should not have been it's so easily fixed. And we just refuse to do it. So we have dead people on the rolls. In the case of Nevada, which was all mail-in election, thousands upon thousands of ballots that were cast by people who no longer live in the state. That's ridiculous. It's unacceptable. And it's embarrassing, frankly, because, like I said, I mean, we have historically been viewed as, a premier representative democracy, as an example to the world, and have been out for decades now, since at least the end of World War II, trying to help transform the rest of the world in adopting our best practices. We don't have best practices anymore. Until we get them back, we don't have a lot, really, unfortunately, to say to the rest of the world about how to go about these things. And I hope that's, Trump's got to get to the bottom of this. And if the Justice Department is not taking it seriously, then you got to make personnel changes. A lot of people think that should have been done a long time ago. In
my quest to end this interview on a hopeful note, I think I'm probably being ineffective there. So let me summarize what your take is. That the Supreme Court is politically ineffective enough that they will be given all the evidence they need to make the ruling that they should make, but doesn't have the political will or the stones to stand up and go, okay, this election was rigged in so many ways. We got to do it again, or I don't know what the remedy is there.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. What is because you're dealing with retroactive remedy, which makes it an unusual, that's what always makes justice difficult, because usually the crime, the harm that's been incurred is already been done. You can't undo it. I started looking state by state and going, gosh, this is like so overwhelming that it presses up against what is even constitutionally available to us. I mean, could you redo the whole thing? I mean, I don't know. If you've got a third of the country's systems of ballot counting that were manipulated, how do you not do that? What do you do in a case like Michigan, for instance, where you had several hundred thousand ballots that were counted in the absence of poll watchers, when the statute requires that poll watchers be allowed to watch every one of those? You either count those or you throw all of them out. Mm-hmm. Like, there's not any middle range remedy on how to do that. And I think you have to err in taking all of these violations seriously. And that means throwing out a lot of these votes that were tabulated in illegal, unethical ways.
You think that, that there's a possibility that this could be sent to the House, one state, one vote, majority takes it type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of strategies at work, and, I would be not continuing to address this if I didn't think that victory was a possibility. I do feel the most important message is it's inexcusable that we're in this situation, having to address these unusual and atypical remedies. We should have had a free and fair election, and we also needed to stop blaming the other side for doing their worst when we didn't do our best. And I think there's a lot more we need to know about the individuals who should have been. I mean, we knew. I could have told you, and anyone. In fact, Trump did tell you. He says, Philadelphia, bad things happen. That they shut down their entire traffic court. It was that corrupt. There's judges in jail. There's a congressman in jail, which was what was mysterious about it leading up to this whole thing, that we had this history that we had to proactively, starting in August or September, where it looked like there were going to be a heavy-duty amount of mail-in ballots. We kept being told in the media, there's no real serious history of electoral fraud. This is a total lie the conservatives are making up. And worse yet, there won't be in this one. Like, proactively, like, they had some foresight to be able to determine that is a fact. I found that to be very concerning right away, and probably suggestive of broader messaging that was acutely aware that there were immense vulnerabilities and immense opportunities for fraud. And it also, to your point of Biden spending, basically the entire campaign season in his Wilmington, Delaware basement, which made no sense to most of us at the time, now makes a little more sense. If you're going to them and saying, look, you're going to probably win the election, but if you don't, we got all these sort of steps in place that we're going to be able to take, you're probably feeling a little more confident now all of a sudden. Like, well, why am I going to make the effort to go out and campaign and just misstate things and get more opponents? So he didn't campaign. And the fact that 80 million Americans voted for him is very much in question, in my view.
And your message to guys like me that are politically addicted and feeling the next day after I woke up after the election, I said, okay, that's it. I'm out. I'm detached from the result of this. I think I was more in denial than I was saying I've been freed from this, because I've invested a whole lot of time, energy, my intellectual curiosity into, well, what's this thing about the cages? What's this? Dreamers, and looking at the issues in depth. And, the left has turned me off so much that I just feel like if these guys actually take control, like I feel hopeless. What do you say even to the casual observer that goes, man, we're screwed if this is allowed to go on? I think my mother, if she was here, would say, Jimmy, how does it affect your life who's president of the United States? Go sell houses. You're a realtor? Go to work. Go make money. Take care of yourself. That's it.
Sometimes I just wake up and I wish I didn't know things I knew.
You wish you could go back to that obliviousness?
Yeah. And it's kind of the red pill, blue pill thing, right? You decide which pill you're going to take, and when you take that red pill,
it tastes like shit.
You decide intellectually that you're committed to knowing and understanding the truth, maintaining critical thinking, understanding that the way things are explained to you may or may not be the way they really are. It goes pretty deep in a recognition that of why we need individual, rights and individual empowerment is that, we are misrepresenting these things. I think from your standpoint, I don't know. I'm on Sirius XM in Canada every once in a while. They're not too bad, but it would be good to see a network of conservative broadcasters in Canada. I think Canada, like the United States, is screaming out of people that want to hear the truth. And I'll bet you could find half a dozen good colleagues put together, sort of the next Salem media that we have in the U.S. or other, things. And really, you can't Rush Limbaugh, who is now in a bad state of health, but whose contributions to this country have been immense. You can't underestimate the impact that he's had just in being able to talk to regular Americans on a day-to-day basis about the things that are going on. And so what should you do? That's my best advice. Talk to Canadians and talk on an understandable level about why the things that should be done are not being done and why the things that can be done, the things that are being done are not necessarily in the interests of Canadians. And I think you're going to get across that message, and you're going to see a lot of people looking to be a lot more engaged in changing the direction of that country and ensuring that it is indeed glorious and free.
Amen to that. Thank you very much for your time today. I find myself thanking guys like you. I said the same thing to Matheny the other day. I'm a huge fan of Eric. He's come on my show like this. And
he's a good guy.
Oh,
he's an attorney.
Just bright and really good. The communication is it's almost flawless. I'm a big fan. Anyways, he invited me on his show the other day for a 20-minute segment at the end of the show, and I'm like, dude, thank you. I'm the little guy. He goes, no, Jimmy, you're not the little guy. I've been on your show twice, blah, blah, blah. So I appreciate your time. You didn't have to do this. On the way out, who are your allies in this business? Like, who are you chummy with? Who's got your back? Who are you working with?
Well, I try to work with anyone and really everyone and anyone. But obviously, as a day one Trump supporter, I gave a lot of conservative credibility to Trump when he needed it, because one of the talking lines on him was that he was going to betray all these promises. He was just saying it. He didn't mean any of it. He was really a pro-choice liberal who would he would run as conservative. And I said, look, no, I don't think that's going to happen. And I took a lot of incoming heat from that. But I'm a movement conservative, identify with any and all conservatives. I'm a founder of the Tea Party movement, so the 40 or million or so Americans that are engaged in that are my allies. And those who, I don't really feel like I have enemies aside from those who are engaged in consciously harmful policies or tactics. And there's much lately, it's been about the tactics of individual assaults on people and violence and things like that. Those are inexcusable. And now, if there's individuals who've been involved in any criminal component of election rigging, that's also obviously an inexcusable thing. So, and I view myself, we use this label conservative. I don't know why though. It's like, to me, my views are pretty centrist. For instance, I agree with Trump. Medicare, Social Security are bedrocks of retirement now. Maybe they could have been structured better. Maybe they could have been done we need to stand by those programs at this point. I mean, so I'm not out there seeking some radical dismantling of things and looking to preserve and protect a country of promise for all Americans, and especially for those Americans who've been underserved with really detrimental political leadership, particularly in our cities in this country.
I appreciate your message. It sounds open, tolerant, and what's that when you work with the other side? I can't remember. My brain goes flat. Just when you're open to collaboration, this is what we need. This whole idea of we got to come together as a platitude is kind of weak, but man, we're not going anywhere unless we work together. And you'd think we could find some common ground. I joke, if Trump cured cancer, they'd complain that, he contributed to the unemployment of all the people in the cancer industry. Like it's just, it's gotten so polarized and so divided and spiteful and angry. And I put myself in that camp too. I mean,
and there's complicated reasons why. I mean, he has threatened the core of liberalism. Mm-hmm. He took more African American and Hispanic votes than any Republican presidential candidate in history. He was starting to eat into their base. He was taking away their image of being the party of common working men and women, depicting them as the elitist, the disengaged, selfish political force that they really were. This is why he was a threat, is that ultimately he was redefining our party in ways that made it really relatable and really shining a light on the absurdity of some of the things that they were embraced in. And of course they were threatened by that. And that's where we're at still. So thank you, Jim. Keep in touch. Man. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And keep me posted on what you're doing.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I don't know. I'm a political junkie, so conversations like that are important to me, and I didn't know what I was going to get from Michael Johns, but that did not suck. So for all of you that stuck around for the whole conversation, thank you. And if you like it that much, share it around. Peace, love, hug your neighbor, and while you're at it, take that mask off. It's not working.